Before we write down what the equation for a recursive routine looks like, I want to think for just a minute. You guys told me a minute ago, you reminded me that if I say recursive routine, you think start value and operation. We've done a little bit of calculating with recursive routines in this unit. If you think about the calculating we've been doing, we always start with the start value, and then we add the operation onto that, right? You guys have also started using some other things too that you've used off and on for a couple of problems that we've done, and I want to remind you of that. Let's say my operation is 5, and I need to get down to the 20th term. I could do plus 5, plus 5, plus 5, plus 5, plus 5, plus 5 until I get down to the 20th term, right? What would be a faster way through that? Multiply. Most of you guys, instead of going plus 5, plus 5, plus 5, plus 5, plus 5 20 times, you would just do 5 times 20 and then tag that onto the start value, right? Yes. That's exactly what the equation does. We're going to write down an equation outline and then we'll label some things. And this equation has some variables that are kind of standard notation in algebra. So there's kind of a universal variable that we use for the start value in algebra, and there's a universal variable that we use for the operation in algebra, and those are just kind of the standard that's accepted. So like if you opened up an Algebra 1 book, you'll see our recursive routine equation in there, and it'll use these same variables that we're going to put in your notebook. So this recursive routine equation that we're introducing today is a very, very popular algebra equation. Here's what it looks like. We'll write it down and then we'll label it and we'll talk about it a little bit. So the equation, y equals b plus m times x. And I'm actually going to put, this could also be a minus. We'll talk about y in just a minute. So we said a minute ago that when we use a recursive routine, we start with the start value and then we add on to that, right? So B is kind of the placeholder where we fill in our start value. That's where you put the start value. So I'm going to label that start value. And then I'm going to add on to that a bunch of times, right? So plus 5, plus 5, plus 5, plus 5. Or if I'm subtracting, minus 5, minus 5, minus 5. And that's why I put a little plus minus symbol. You guys know that when you're writing out the operation, I've been telling you you have to have that plus or minus on the operation, right? The reason for that is so that when you drop it into the equation, it automatically adds if it needs to add and subtracts if it needs to subtract. So if it was plus 5, I would fill in plus 5 and my equation would be adding. If it was minus 5, I would fill in minus 5 and my equation would be subtracting, just like the operation's supposed to. So this part, right there, that's where my operation goes. We're not going to worry about labeling this yet because we're actually going to talk a little bit more about it tomorrow. But the x, that's just where I fill in how many times I want to use my operation. So if I wanted to add 5 20 times, I would do 5 times 20. So that's all the x is. It's just how many times am I using my operation. And then all of that gives me the answer. Y is the answer. So it would be like the 20th term or whatever I'm trying to find.